We, mass society, have lost the plot. We have financialized money in a way that is so counterproductive. It's kind of crazy that we go to work, we earn value, and then we gamble that value so we can have some in the future. It's like, what? What kind of nonsense? You have to work twice for your dollar. And that's crazy. That is not a system that is conducive to long, happy, and healthy life. It just doesn't work. You have to work twice, once to make and then once to preserve your dollar. That dollar, that money should be good until you spend it. And it sucks that we live in a world where the money by default is broken, where the money by default is getting less and less and less valuable. And Bitcoin changes that, Bitcoin fixes that, and Bitcoin allows us to only focus on building, to only focus on providing value for the world.
All right. So today I have the pleasure of being joined by Adam O'Brien on the show. Adam, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Yo, it's great to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So usually where I love to get kind of the show started, as the title implies, Bitcoin journeys. I'd love to get started where, you would say is the beginning of your Bitcoin journey. And I want to preface that and also say that could be, before you discovered Bitcoin, but maybe something leading up to it that led you to kind of be open to accepting Bitcoin. Because I saw that, and I won't spoil the story for you, but I saw that you were quite early to Bitcoin. So I'm curious from your perspective, kind of where did that journey for you really start?
Dude, I think that anyone that was early like me into Bitcoin, their Bitcoin journey doesn't start when they find Bitcoin. For me, it started when I was like 5. I was the annoying kid that asked why about everything. And I'm dealing with that with my son right now, my 9-year-old. He's like, everything is like, why? And it's like, I got to remember that's a good trait. It's the trait of a Bitcoiner. But it's like, it truly, for me, it started very, very early. If I was to, the picture that came to my mind right when you asked that question was when I was 10 years old, my mom was a stay-at-home like bookkeeper, accountant.
Yeah.
And I must have been homesick one day or something. And I took apart her computer and then rebuilt it right in the middle of her workday. She was upset, obviously, because it like prevented her from doing work. But I just had this like this tenacious curiosity that I always wanted to understand like how things worked. And I was deeply curious about the world and about why things were important. And so, fast forward a couple of years from there, and I started just like falling in love with the art of sales. Just started like I was selling everything. My dad was a traveling salesman. My mom and dad were together, and so he'd leave for like 2 or 3 days a week to go and like manage his territory or whatever. And it'd be me, my mom, and my sister at home, and I would like sell the couch, sell the TV, sell the Xbox. I think, and then that translated into my like when I was 16. But by the time I was 20 years old, I think I'd owned like 30 cars because I just like not all at once. I would just like buy one, drive it for a month, and then sell it. I just loved making a deal and loved selling stuff. And then when I heard about Bitcoin, I was a bartender. I was like 20 years old, maybe 19. And I was just like, fake internet money. What a joke. But deeply curious. And so started, learning, researching, tinkering. At that time, there were not really any wallets. So I like whipped up a node, learned how to do that, which was super cool. There was these really cool, like the IRC chats, which are like deep underground, like kind of decentralized chatting networks. And so I learned how to like, join those and lurk on the IRC chats, and all the while just kind of learning about Bitcoin. But I mean, as anyone on a Bitcoin journey knows, like you don't just learn about Bitcoin when you start learning about Bitcoin, right? You like, for me, it was like a learn about technology. I wasn't like I was technical enough, but I wasn't like a programmer. So I learned how to code, learned how to like command line program with the Bitcoin nodes, learned about encryption, learned about the history of money, learned about the importance of deflation, um, you learn about all this stuff, and it was just like I was a sponge. I couldn't stop. I was addicted to learning about Bitcoin. And so, yeah, but I think like, there's from my pre-coiner days to my, now I have Bitcoin, but I was a Bitcoiner kind of like moving up to that point. To your point, it was like, I think if I was to sum up who is a Bitcoiner, it's people that are deeply curious, comfortable questioning their reality, and completely willing to look like an idiot to the mass majority of people. And that's just been me my whole life.
Yeah. No, that's super accurate, and I couldn't agree more. I think I've been doing the show for about a year and a half now, and I think that's a
Wow.
common trait that I see throughout everybody is like curiosity, because I think to understand Bitcoin and to really understand it, I think it takes curiosity, because I think especially nowadays, it's easy to kind of see it on the surface level, and especially now because you have a lot of other cryptocurrencies out there, it's easy to dismiss it as one of those, and you kind of like. And you see it also a lot with like the older financial people who are used to the traditional system. They kind of dismiss it because I don't think they're curious enough to understand what it actually is. And so curiosity, I think, is super important trait to have in Bitcoin to really understand it. And
Yeah, man. I think too, just to like touch on that quickly though, because people call me like I'm a maxi, like I'm like a Bitcoin only kind of guy. Um and people often will attack Bitcoiners like me and be like, "Oh, you're closed-minded. Bitcoin is old tech. Like you're no different than the Peter Schiffs of Bitcoin, blah blah blah." It's like, well, hang on a second, because just because something is old doesn't necessarily mean that it's outdated or wrong. And I think we have that problem where we assume that technology, they're like, Bitcoin is the MySpace of crypto. It's like, well, MySpace died because it stopped being relevant, not because it was old. And I think those two things are very, very important. Bitcoin is going to last 3 millennium if the world exists for that long. And it's like the reason is because it so perfectly and purely represents the human being's time that it doesn't do anything other than that, and it doesn't need to. And as a result, it will always be relevant. But when I look at these other cryptos and they're like centralized casinos, it's kind of like, what what is this doing? Like how is this going to remain? Or it's like, it's faster, it's got more tokens, it's got a better vision, it solves world peace, and it's like, maybe, but is it better money? Because I like Bitcoin because it's does a really really good job at being money, and no one can um, corrupt that, and that's why Bitcoin's so important to me. And I haven't yet to find anything that does it better. But when I do, I'll jump ship and move over there, because I'm not married to Bitcoin. I'm married to objective truth, and I'm married to the objective desire to like preserve my wealth through generations. And yeah, show me a better tool than Bitcoin and I'll jump ship. But it just doesn't exist today.
yeah, and that's really well said. I think that especially the part on objective truth, because I think um, well, I think like you said, right? A lot of the people who come into Bitcoin, and especially now, because yeah, you have all these other coins. Because I mean, it's still a question that I get asked immediately. When I tell people that I'm working in Bitcoin, it's like, oh yeah, but what about this coin or that coin? And it's like, it all comes down to, I think, also, well, one, lack of understanding, right? People who typically ask that question haven't done the work to really understand, what it is and how it works, and also kind of this first principles thinking, because I think exactly what you said, right? You're on the hunt for the best money. You're on the hunt for objective truth. And I think that also stems down to first principles, and kind of like you were saying also, right? You studied monetary history, you studied the technological aspects. And so you understand fundamentally like the concepts that are needed to make this, like that what make Bitcoin, right? But I think that's something that is missing a lot, and also a motivation to do the podcast is because, like, I think now, especially a lot of the other coins, it's all marketing heavy, and like you said, it's going to be, oh, it's going to do this and that, and it's going to replace Visa, or it's going to replace this or that. But when you go down to like the bare bolts of things, it's important to understand what is a blockchain in the first place. Why is it made? What
Totally.
creates decentralization? And I think yeah, that's something that's still really lacking.
Yeah, man, 100%. I think it's catastrophic that we mass society have lost the plot on what money is. And like really if you think about it, we have financialized money in a way that is so counterproductive. Like it's kind of crazy that we go to work, we earn value, and then we gamble that value so we can have some in the future. It's like, what? What kind of nonsense? You have to work twice for your dollar. And that's crazy. That is not a system that is conducive to a long, happy, and healthy life. It just doesn't work. You have to work twice, once to make and then once to preserve your dollar. And let me be super clear. I am very much in favor of working very hard to earn money. I am not in favor of having to continue to work once you've earned that dollar, that money should be good until you spend it. And it sucks that we live in a world where the money by default is broken, where the money by default is getting less and less and less valuable. And Bitcoin changes that, Bitcoin fixes that, and Bitcoin allows us to only focus on building, to only focus on providing value for the world. And I think that's where that's where we get to thrive, is that we're no longer splitting our time and our attention as a society. We no longer have to gamble and worry about the future, about our economic future. We no longer have to, gamble the value that we've already created uh, just for the hope that we can buy something in the future. And that is that's a bullish society. A society that can just focus on building and providing value is a good society.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's often why, Bitcoiners can be so passionate in a good way about
Mm.
about Bitcoin. And I think why it's such a lively community is because it's not about, releasing the next token where you can, put your hands in an ICO and then cash out and walk away. It's about really fixing the money. And I think, kind of this concept on fixing the money, fixing the world is, yeah, one of the most noble causes there is, because we see that now, right? I think we see when money breaks down, and I think that's why it's also important to study history, look at other cultures and societies where the money started to break down, and you start to see the effects that that has, not just on, the individual, but on society at large. And I think that's why this mission of like Bitcoin is so much bigger than just like, a coin or something. It's really
Yeah.
about going to the root of a lot of the issues. Like you said, people having to work twice to keep the value of their money. And I think more and more people are starting to wake up to that, because I think before it was maybe things that people experienced mostly in like, third world countries, let's say, like Zimbabwe or Venezuela or countries like that. But now I think it's coming closer and closer to home, and you're starting to see all these, like in the US and Europe, the society start to break down because people are starting to, I think, realize that their money is just, melting underneath them essentially.
Yeah, man. I think it's history doesn't really repeat, but it rhymes. And I think that we are kidding ourselves if we think that the US dollar is going to remain the world reserve for, much longer than any other currency. And it's like most fiat currencies are dead after, I think it's like 29 years or something.
Hmm.
The prominent ones, like the real ones, the good ones, if you want to call them that, they kind of get to last about 100. And I think the US dollar is coming up on 105 or 106. So it's kind of like it's had a good life. It's time to upgrade. It's time to upgrade to the better model of money, to the better, I think, monetary system. And that's decentralized. It's removal of power and it's the removal of the power between the granting of access of money and state. It's taking away the ability to devalue a human being's time from the government, and it's allowing us to prosper and thrive under a truly free economic standard, which is the Bitcoin protocol.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, I'd love to, because I think whenever I talk to, people like yourself who were really early into Bitcoin, I think it's always fascinating to hear a bit more about the early days, because I think, people now, there's a lot more infrastructure, there's a lot more information about Bitcoin, and kind of like you said, when you discover it, you were building a Bitcoin node through the command line, and it wasn't as easy as it is today, where you have like some plug and play solution. So I'm curious to hear a bit more about, well, first maybe like when you discovered Bitcoin, you mentioned you had this innate curiosity which led you to question what it was, understand what it was. But because it was still so early, what were your thoughts around its longevity? Was it something that immediately stood out to you as like, okay, this is, could you have predicted, for example, where it would be today, or what were your thoughts at that time?
Oh man, no. If you told me that in my career we'd see presidents of the United States talking about Bitcoin, I would have called you crazy. I couldn't in the early days, uh, I couldn't talk to anyone about Bitcoin. No one knew what it was, and the people that had heard about it thought it was a scam. So it's like it's crazy to see how quickly and how fast, and I think how large Bitcoin has gotten here. But I think that the 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 root of that is just that good ideas kind of tend to flow and spread like wildfire, and the fact that this is so decentralized kind of means it's probably harder to get off the ground. But once it's off the ground, it's impossible to stop. And I think that that's the main difference between Bitcoin and, you know, other crypto projects and even business. And yeah, most of that is just like Bitcoin succeeds where gold failed. Gold is arguably the only other decentralized form of value preservation or tool to preserve value, and Bitcoin fixes the problems that gold has. And it's yeah, back in the early days, man, it was no, to your point, there was no tools. There was no like Umbrel node that you just got to plug in and then play. I'm looking at right now a Start9 node that I just got, and it's like I just have to plug that in and turn it on, and like that's it. Like I don't have to struggle with a like Debian errors and like all these other like issues that exist or that existed for kind of laymen like me. Yeah, it's super super cool. I can kind of remember, and this is I think there's actually this interesting shift happening in Bitcoin right now where like when I was in Bitcoin, if anybody anywhere uttered the word Bitcoin in the meat space in the real world, it was like big news in the community, right? Like I remember Bitcoin Solutions was Bitcoin well before we rebranded, and we made a billboard that just said HODL, or maybe stay calm and HODL, or something like that, something to that effect with Bitcoin, and we bought that billboard in I think in Edmonton and Calgary, kind of in Alberta. And it was like, I posted about it, and like, all 8 Bitcoiners in Alberta at the time were like, "Whoa, this is so crazy! Like, I can't believe it!" Blah blah blah. And I was in New York a couple weeks ago, and there was like, I think I saw 10 Bitcoin billboards. Like,
Yeah.
they're everywhere. It doesn't matter. And I was talking with people in the space that sell Bitcoin merch or Bitcoin paraphernalia, whatever that it may be, and they were saying that this season of Bitcoiners are different. We're not excited about Bitcoin just existing like we once were, because we kind of take the existence for granted. We're not really like a group of people anymore that's like, holy smokes, I just saw Bitcoin on TV. Like I remember The Good Lawyer or The Good Wife or what, like a show about a lawyer. I think it's called Good Wife or Good Lawyer or something like that. She like was talking about Bitcoin, and it was like all over Reddit. It was like it was just an insane concept in like 2016 or 2017 or something for a mainstream TV show to be talking about Bitcoin. You had Mr. Robot talking about encryption and Bitcoin. It was like mainstream. It was like, whoa, this is crazy. I can't believe, and at the same time, I'm on an airplane talking about what I do to like my, seat neighbor or whatever. And he's like, Bitcoin. Oh, I think I've heard of that. I can't remember what it is though, right? Like this was the world that we lived in at the time. And today, every single person has heard of Bitcoin. I no longer like when somebody asks me what I do, I say I'm in the Bitcoin industry. I don't say, "Oh, have you heard of Bitcoin? It's kind of like a digital gold type of money that you can, that you can own." It's like I'm in the Bitcoin industry. It's like, "Oh, okay." And then now the confusion is, "Oh, yeah, Adam's in the crypto industry." It's like, "No, no, 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 no. I'm in the Bitcoin industry." And yeah, but it's definitely come a long way, man. And it's really interesting to see how the world has adjusted and adapted in that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, yeah, like you said, I think a lot of people nowadays take it for granted. I think especially because the importance of the journey that Bitcoin had to go to get here. Because I think that's why, a lot of people, and kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with the MySpace and Facebook example, it's like the conditions under which, Bitcoin was made, where you had a pseudonymous individual or group, make it, release it, then walk away. And it was able to scale to a point where it got so, powerful that governments aren't able to stop it. It's like that kind of conception of inception of how Bitcoin was able to be built, and now to a point where we're sitting, at around 100,000 US dollars, and people are, losing their mind when it crashes 20%. It kind of like, I think people fail to sometimes grasp the bigger picture of like, people are so, I think nowadays, so focused on what's happening now, that it's like, okay, take a step back, realize like how far we've come and how far we will go. But it's just like these things, take time. You're talking about 2013. That's 12 years ago when you discovered it, and I think we're still, in my opinion, I always tell people we're still very early in
Oh yeah.
Bitcoin's overall adoption journey.
Yeah, dude, I think like Bitcoin doesn't exist for you and I. Bitcoin exists for our great-grandkids. And when we think that, you know, a price crash in 2025, it means nothing for the longevity and the future of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is inevitable. And I think because of the financialization of money that we talked about earlier, and because of the high time preference of most people in fiat, and frankly, a lot of people in Bitcoin, we get wrapped up in price. And
Yeah.
you can see the pleb slop on Twitter. You can see the high, and I see it too. Whenever we post a chart on Twitter, 10x the engagement. Whenever we post about all time highs, 10x. But I was looking this morning, and price is down right now. I'm not sure when you're releasing this, but like today, our sells are up 35%, but our buys are up 168%. And it's like, that is a meaningful metric to me. That means that we have acquired a group of customers that are so convicted about Bitcoin that when the price drops, people and our customers are buying, and that makes me feel very good. That makes me feel like we've got a group of friends really that exist here. And I think that more and more and more people are kind of realizing that and are coming to that level of conviction, and that's super cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's why it kind of goes back to what we've been talking, right? Understanding what you own, because like I think,
Yeah.
Bitcoin's notorious for the volatility, and I think in the volatility is also where the opportunity is. But I think it's the people who don't understand what they own that then succumb to the fear of the market and sell. And I think that's why it's just crucial to really understand what you own, and be confident in that, right? Because I think, and that's what I always tell people, like, I have friends who, when, even like price crashes, when the price goes down, like we've been seeing in the past few days, I have people text me saying, "Oh, what's happening with Bitcoin? What's going on?" And I always tell them, like, look, there's nothing fundamental that's changed with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the same today
Yo.
as it was 2 weeks ago. But like what's happening is, yeah, you may have macroeconomic stuff where, the president of the US is doing this and China's doing that, or people have fear for the AI bubble that's going to blow up, or whatever it may be, whatever, it can be something different. But it's just like, just take a step back. And I always tell people, just ask the question, like, has anything fundamental changed about the value proposition of Bitcoin? And if the answer is no, then just stay calm and, hold. But to understand the value proposition, you have to also educate yourself and understand what it is, right?
And isn't that kind of cool that that's the naturally aligned incentives that a fair and equal monetary system create? Like, isn't it cool that those that have put the work in, that have the conviction, now have a buying opportunity when those that haven't are selling and causing pain to their heirs, to their bloodline? Like, isn't that just the naturally aligned incentives of a fair and equal monetary system? And isn't it so cool that Bitcoin does that kind of by accident? Like, kind of, it's like you can really see that when you when you point your when you point your North Star towards like equality, fairness, and fair and equality don't mean like everyone has the same stuff. Fair and equality means everyone has the same opportunity. And I think that that's what Bitcoin is like, completely agnostic. Bitcoin doesn't discriminate. Bitcoin doesn't care. The Bitcoin protocol will allow you to use it regardless of your history, regardless of your past, regardless of your political affiliations, regardless of anything. That's not true of the US dollar. It's not true of the Canadian dollar. It's not true of actually anything on the planet that I can think of. There's a period of time where I wasn't allowed to leave my country because I didn't take some kind of medicine. Like, that is a crazy world to live in. And yet we have a monetary system that doesn't discriminate. I couldn't go to church. The churches were closed. I could not go worship my God because of some kind of, you know, like some kind of sickness that was or maybe was not going around the world. And Bitcoin doesn't care. And that's cool. That's an economic system that is free and that I can get behind. And frankly, I think that most people can get behind. I think if you asked most people, you would say, or you would, if you ask them, do you think men should be able to pick and choose who can provide value, who can receive value, who can use money? I don't think anyone, right, left, or otherwise, would say yes, men should choose. I think their actions say different things, but I think that at the surface, we all know that it is very, very wrong and evil to give men the power to strip another man of his economic power and economic freedom.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think a lot of people, I think, still, fail to realize that's possible. And I think, that comes back to also understanding the banking system, the Federal Reserve, how all of that works. I also want to, because you touched also on a good point there, which I'm curious, about your perspective of, because I think, as you mentioned, Bitcoin is a perfect, free market in a sense, right? Like, it doesn't discriminate. And what's funny is, like, you have people who now, talk about, like, oh, like for you, for example, right? You got into Bitcoin in 2013. Like, man, I wish I knew what Bitcoin was in 2013. I'd be a millionaire right now, and I'd be, living on a beach somewhere or whatever. But at the same time, or even people, to talk to me when I got in much later than you, but it's like, yeah, but you got in when it was 7K or 6K or whatever it was, and now it's at this. And it's like, yeah, but I also did the work to understand what it was, to understand the value proposition, so that when it went up from, 6K to 70K, but then back down to 16K, I never panicked. I never, like, you know, panic sold into the market, and then, and then it went up again. So it's like this kind of concept of there's no free lunch. And I think people like yourself who have been in Bitcoin so long, it may seem like easy from the outside, but 99% of people who would have maybe bought Bitcoin at 20 would have probably also sold it at $100, because they said, oh, I 5x my money, and, I'm out. So I'm
Yeah,
curious a bit
dude, that's
about
the
your
story of
perspective.
many of my friends. I got a buddy. He bought 2 Bitcoin for $400, um, because I told him to, and then he had a speeding ticket, and he sold those 2 Bitcoin for $800 to pay a speeding ticket. And it's like, he was pumped. He was like, sick, doubled my money, paid my ticket. Like, I'm a hero. And it's like, yo, you could have bought a house today. You could have bought a house today or a really
The
sick
speeding
car.
ticket ever.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And let me be clear. I've done the same thing. I sold 100 Bitcoin and bought a car. Um, I could have bought a mansion. You know what I mean? And it's like we all go through it. That's important. It's because we've never seen we are completely relearning how to look at money. We're completely relearning how our brains are wired. We've been conditioned for generations on a financialized monetary system. And when you remove the financialization of money, your time preference just plummets. Your time preference just gets so low and so good and so healthy. It's like, did I need that car? You know, did I need that big house? Did I need this this private jet? Did I really need these things? Or should I have just, should I have just held on? Should I have just, stacked or hodled? And man, like it's nice that the problem in Bitcoin is finding the balance between quality of life and future blessings. And that's a cool place to be.
For sure, and I think that's a bit the eternal struggle as Bitcoiners, right? Because
Mm,
it's kind of like you mentioned the time preference part, where once you understand, how valuable this is going to be in the future, it's like, yeah, but do I want to buy the car now because do I really need it, or do I want to keep renting it? But then it's kind of like the balance where it's like, yeah, but at the same time, like I always say, like the only thing more scarce than Bitcoin is time, right? And I think
yeah, man. Time and
money,
experience, right?
time and
Like,
experience, yeah.
yeah. Like we spend, like my wife and I spend, so every time one of we have four kids, ages 9, 7, 6, and 3. And every time one of them turns 5, we take just them on this like awesome Disney World trip for like 5 days. And it costs a lot of money, man. Like we have spent multiple Bitcoin doing that across our kids. I mean, think about the 9-year-old 4 years ago. Like it it's cost us generational wealth to do that. And I don't regret a single moment. The experience that we get to have with our kid who's never going to be 5 again, right? We're never, and also like we got 4 kids. It's a busy household. We're not exactly doing one-on-one stuff very often. And so to be able to afford and have that time with our kids, to your point, that time and I think more importantly than just the time, because time is scarce, but it's also like it's scarce but predictable. Like you always have tomorrow, right? If you mess up today, you can always build tomorrow. And that's a cool thing about time is that it's simultaneously scarce and not scarce all at once. Or maybe scarce, but like, do you kind of see where I'm going with that? But the experiences, like the way that time moves is incredibly finite. And I'm never, ever, ever gonna have, maybe I'll have more 5-year-old sons, but I won't ever have this son that's 5. And that's crazy. That is such a deep, and the realization, like Bitcoin helped me realize that. Bitcoin helps me understand the scarcity and value of time in a way that I don't think and it could be just that I'm getting old and maturing and becoming a leader and all this stuff, but I don't feel like other financial assets that real estate shows me the same thing, or the S&P 500 teaches me about being a better father. Like I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's because it's Bitcoin is money. And I think all the other stuff, like, I actually just read a really good book. It's new. I'm sure you probably heard of it. The Treasury of Michael Saylor, the
Cool.
one that Anil Patel wrote. And I mean, because Michael Saylor is a brilliant, like, first principles thinker and all that stuff. And so he highlights a lot of like the fundamental concepts that Michael Saylor talks about. And one of them that really stood out to me was kind of like we were talking about earlier, right? Like a lot of money has flown into stocks and real estate and things like that, not for its utility value, but for
Totally.
speculation, right? To be able to actually just like, okay, well, I'm not going to keep my money in cash because that's just a melting ice cube. So I'm going to have to put it into real estate or stocks or whatever. And
Or a
Bitcoin
human.
is something. Yeah,
You
exactly.
got to you got to gamble on Elon Musk's ability to fly spaceships around the sky.
Exactly. And like the differentiation for me is like Bitcoin's actually money. So you could just put it there as money is supposed to be. And I always tell people like, look, with Bitcoin, for me, I also see it as like a one-way trade. I mean, eventually you want to trade it for experiences or for something, but like I'm not buying it with the intention of flipping it for a profit later, you know? And I think that's also kind of a mentality that's helped me a lot, is like view Bitcoin like as a savings account, you know, put it in there with the intention to not immediately need it, right? Because that's obviously, because it's volatile. If you're putting it in there to then need it within a month, like, okay, yeah, you might lose value, it might go up, but keep it in there and hold it. And I think that's kind of the big differentiation between like something that actually like is a money versus something
Hmm.
that's being speculated on just because the other money doesn't, you know, hold its value over time.
Yeah, man. It kind of like it allows us to, or it incentivizes us to live within our means. And when you live within your means, the price of Bitcoin doesn't matter. The only reason the price of Bitcoin matters is if you're living outside your means or if you're leveraged up. And it's like both those things don't really work out too well for most people long term. So, once again, we've got this naturally aligned incentive system which encourages a long and healthy life. That's like, that is so cool. That is just, it's something that people, I don't think people grasp how a naturally aligned incentive economic system can allow society or encourage society to prosper. It's like, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I love to, you know, because I think, I mean, obviously, a big part of your Bitcoin journey also is starting Bitcoin well. And I think it's, you know, a really, really interesting company and a really interesting approach towards building, you know, a Bitcoin company. And so I'd love to kind of dive into that part of your story as well, kind of, well, how was it started? What was the motivation to start it? And also for my listeners, maybe, you know, I haven't heard of Bitcoin well, what it is that you guys do exactly.
Yeah, man. I think so. As you mentioned, or as we talked about in my Bitcoin journey, like found Bitcoin, went through the pain, and then I wanted to buy some Bitcoin, and had just like a terrible experience doing that. Like it was like at the time there was no real good exchanges. My options were wire money to Russia or meet this sketchy guy in a back alley. And so it's like, you know, met this guy in a back alley, got like the full drug dealer stabby experience. Like it was just awful. And I was like, you know, I'm probably not the only guy that wants to buy Bitcoin. Maybe I'll just put an ad online and see if people like on Facebook and we have Kijiji in Canada, like, and I'll just meet someone at Starbucks and we'll have a coffee and I'll sell them Bitcoin. And to my surprise, my phone just started ringing and it was like, hey, I want to meet up and buy whatever, $1,000 in Bitcoin. I was like, okay. So I meet up with them and buy $1,000. And another guy was like, hey, I have 30 Bitcoin that I want to sell. And it was like, oh, okay. Like, why don't I just buy those from you? We'll meet up. And over time, it kind of just started growing. And then later that year, the world's first Bitcoin ATM was launched in Vancouver in Canada. And I was like, wow, that's way better than meeting people and like having to answer the phone, like, you know, driving all around town. Maybe I'll just buy one of those. So I did. And we launched Alberta, which is my province, and then Saskatchewan, which is the neighboring provinces, first Bitcoin ATMs. And once I launched those, I was like, hey, this is sweet. We should do more of this. And so every single, you know, dollar of profit, just bought more machines, found more locations. We started building some like pretty basic technology. Ironically, a margin trading, like we like white labeled a margin trading platform out of Australia. Um, and we just kind of started building. And the mission there was to make Bitcoin accessible. That's all I cared about. I was just like, I want the most people to have opportunity to to um to buy Bitcoin. And like it's kind of cool that that mission was kind of realized, not just through Bitcoin Well, but through like a broader, there's nobody on planet Earth that cannot buy Bitcoin or at least paper Bitcoin in like a day. You know, like that's, or at least maybe not on Earth, but like in the Western, you know, kind of like whatever, civilized part of the world. And it's like civilized is maybe not the right way to say it, but like, you know what I'm saying? And it's like mission accomplished on accessibility. And through that mission of making Bitcoin accessible, lots of my story is that I'm federally debanked. I don't have the luxury of a bank account in Canada, and it
Can
became
we
very clear.
Sorry, because that's also something that I think is really interesting about your story is the debanking, because I think that also speaks a lot to the value proposition of Bitcoin. Would you mind kind of diving into that story a bit? Yeah, before kind of explaining the rest of Bitcoin, well, just because I think it's a really important kind of part of the story also.
Yeah, through a series of operating the Bitcoin ATMs and Operation Choke Point, I became a target and ultimately a victim of the centralized banking system that we have here in Canada. I found myself on the most egregious one, in my opinion, is I got this letter. So our mortgage was up on our house, my wife and I think we had two kids, and our mortgage was up in like September. And I went into the bank in July, and I was like, hey, like I literally went to the branch, and I was like, yeah, we should probably do this. And they're like, oh yeah, don't worry, mortgages they renew, it's all good. And I got this letter in August, and they said, hey, we're calling your mortgage early. It's due right now. We're not going to renew it. And I had like a pile of cash in a business account at the bank, and I was like, okay, well, let's just pay the mortgage off with the cash in the business account. They're like, no, it's frozen. We just froze it. And I was like, hang on, you're telling me that not only are you, like whatever private business, like you can choose to do business with me or not, whatever.
Yeah.
But you're kind of not doing much of a service to me. Like that's kind of short notice. But also you're freezing my money. And they were like, yeah, and by the way, your interest rate just jumped 600% until you find a new lender. And that was kind of like the pin drop moment for me, which was like the money that I have in the Canadian ecosystem will always be exposed to the regime, to whatever the beliefs are of the system that it is in. And I can go on, man. There's another bank that was CIBC. There was another bank where in 2017 they banned me. They gave me a 7-year ban. 2016 maybe. So I was like, all right, banned for 7 years. So like, I'm not going to use them.
But do they give
And
you
then
any
seven.
explanation, or is it just
No explanation. Completely black boxed. It's just like or black box. It's just like demarket letter. Like, and you can see it if you scroll through my Twitter. It's probably like way down, but like I've posted many of the letters that I've gotten from the banks. It's just like, hey, we're not doing business with you anymore. Which again, like I'm okay with that. Like as a pretty libertarian, free market minded individual, like private business, you can choose to do work and business for whoever you want. I believe in the business's right to choose their customers. What I disagree with is the fact that I can't buy a house with cash. What I disagree with is the fact that, I'm debanked, so I have all this cash. And so I I went to buy my wife a car, and at the car dealership, we're like negotiating. I'm like, yo, I'm going to pay in cash. I'm like, oh, yeah, no problem. No problem. We love for you to use loans. And I was like, yeah, you're, like, no, like, you're not going to be able to get me a loan. Like, the banks don't like me that much. So I'm going to pay in cash. Like, oh, yeah, great. I'm like, all right, I'm going to come down with cash to buy the car on Thursday. They're like, yep, sounds good. So I got my backpack on with my money, like go in to pay for the car. And they're like, whoa, what's this? And I'm like, cash, like we've been talking about for 2 weeks. Like I was pretty clear here. I'm paying with cash. And they're like, well, we didn't realize it was going to be cash. And I was like, well, okay, that's kind of dumb, but like, here it is. And they're like, well, we got to give the money to the police. And then if and when the police release it, you can buy the car. And I was like, what? Like, that's not how, no, like, no, that's not, no. And so it's like, fine, if we want to give the banks the ability to choose who they do or don't do business with, fine. But don't make a system where if the banks choose not to do business with me, I'm excluded. That's the crux. That's the root of the issue in my opinion. And that's kind of what I mean when I say Bitcoin is for everyone. Like Bitcoin doesn't care. And that's kind of the point. That's kind of how it should be. And even like, oh, but then people are going to finance terrorism and money laundering. It's like, yeah, we should punish those people. Those people are bad. Those people are evil. They should be punished, and they should not be allowed to have, many of the privileges that exist. But why are you and I getting punished because some other person might do those things? Like, this is the most asinine, ridiculous system that we could possibly, consider. And I think that, only through Bitcoin can you kind of understand and realize the importance of freedom, of economic freedom, of the ability to, of the ability to actually own and control the wealth, the value that you create with your time. And so it was through this, it was through this debanking and this ultimate, what I would call like a, I don't know, how would you call it? An attack on my financial rights, that I shifted the mission of Bitcoin Well from making Bitcoin accessible to enabling independence, because it became very clear to me right away, or over this time, sorry, not right away, but like at that pin drop moment, it was like, whoa, it's not just going to be me that struggles with this. We are heading down, like Operation Choke Point is real, and we are heading down into a system that is going to be attacking maybe just people like me, but probably more people, probably more. And so with enabling independence, what that means is that our customer always needs to have access to their money, always needs to have access to their Bitcoin. And the only way to guarantee that is to send each and every sat that they buy directly to their personal Bitcoin wallet. I don't want the smoke. That's like, I don't ever want to be in a position where we have someone's generational wealth, someone's son's Bitcoin, and we're like, nah, we're not going to give it to you because the government said that we can't, or because you maybe showed up on some list that we're not allowed to sell to, or like whatever. And so we choose not to do business with those people in the first place. And I think that's the right mindset that we need to have. Is private businesses need the ability to choose who to and not to do business with. If it aligns with core values, if it's, like, frankly, some customers are just annoying. I don't want to do business with you. Like, see you later. That's fine. But I don't want to live in a system where my value can become worthless because of the broader regime, because of the broader system. And I think that's what Bitcoin empowers. And Bitcoin Well empowers access to that system. And we want to be the conduit between your bank account and your Bitcoin wallet, and then your Bitcoin wallet and the traditional finance ecosystem. I believe in a world where you can just own and control your entire net worth, your whole wealth, in a private key that solely you own and control. And you should be able to use that to buy a car, to buy a house, to pay a mortgage, to pay rent, to buy groceries, to buy a coffee, to take your son to golf lessons, like whatever it's going to be. And I think that's the world that Bitcoin Well is pursuing and building towards. And yeah, I'm like delusionally confident in the fact that we'll be successful.
Yeah, and I love that mission, and I love that vision, and I think it's a really important one, because I think kind of the distinction that Bitcoin Well has from like a lot of exchanges, is that and I think people don't really recognize the danger in like centralized exchanges, is because like, yeah, when you buy Bitcoin on, let's say, Coinbase, for example, right, it stays, unless you move it to self-custody yourself, which most people don't do. It stays under their control, and then you kind of have all of the problems that are inherent with the traditional system, where, say something happens where all of a sudden your wallet gets restricted because the government said this or that, or there's no new law in your jurisdiction that says you can only, you can't move it to self-custody, whatever the case may be. And I think that's why the importance, like, people need to, I think through your example also of being debanked, I think that's why it's also taking that a step further. And I think that's why Bitcoin Well is so fascinating, is because you don't, like you said, you don't want to smoke, right? You're a conduit to get people into Bitcoin, but then it's their responsibility to control their funds and manage it in a self-sovereign way, which I think is the best way to do it. Of course, it requires responsibility. Of course, it requires learning, but I think, yeah, hearing your story, I think also, I hope when people hear that, they recognize that it's not just something that can happen to you, but it can happen to anybody at any time, right?
Totally, man. And it did. Like, in 2022, we saw the Canadian trucker protest, the largest peaceful protest in human history. And we saw people helping those truckers get debanked. We saw those people losing their bank accounts, losing the value that they were saving, that they were counting on being there. And that's not going to go away. I think that we're going to continue to see, as we get CBDCs, as we get 15-minute cities, as we get more and more control in government, as we get more and more control, as for some reason, the population requests more and more control for the government, we will see less and less people able to access freedom. And I think it's deeply important that we understand the gravity and the severity of that. And then also that we pursue a world that, and at least an economic world that eliminates that threat and that risk.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's an incredibly important mission. And I think, because it's more timely than ever. I think people also maybe don't realize sometimes the scale at which it's accelerating.
Mm,
But even, in the UK, like, for example, they're now really pushing the digital ID and making that part of society. And it's kind of like, with the way that's technology is evolving, I kind of always see it like as a two-road path. It's like you can kind of go like the technological dystopia where you have no privacy and everything's kind of controlled by these centralized institutions, including your wealth, or, kind of the self-sovereign route, which includes, Bitcoin self-custody. But funny enough, this week I also had Matt Hill on the show from Start9, and we had a big conversation also about kind of self-sovereign computing and what that means for the world. And so that's why I think it's inspiring to also talk to founders like yourself, because that's, you want to build like the way to create the future is to build it, right, and to build the future that you want.
totally. Yeah, man, 100%. I think that's too, like, that's always my response to people who question Bitcoin or at least question like deflationary money. They're like, well, if everything's deflationary, no one will spend anything. It's like, no, 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 no. Hoarding money is only a thing because we financialized money. And when we no longer have to hoard money, now we are focused on building, we're focused on experiences, we're focused on lifestyle. And I promise you, one Bitcoiner will want to have a coffee shop. And so they will build a coffee shop. And another Bitcoiner is going to want really, really good grass-fed organic beef. And they will buy the ranch and hire the rancher and fund the cattle initiative. For a profit, he will do a service, a great service for that local economy. And guess what? He'll get paid in Bitcoin and off he goes. And another Bitcoiner is probably very passionate about movies. And he'll want to display the movies that he makes in a really nice movie theater. But then another Bitcoiner is going to also be passionate about movies and think he can improve the movie theater experience. And he'll do another one. And we can see how just because we have deflationary generational wealth that projects into the future, we're not just all sitting on it. We're not just sitting around waiting for our wealth to go up. We want experiences, and we're going to find the balance. We're going to get really, really good as a society at balancing the way we spend, the way we invest in our time and in our community, and the way we save for our future generations. And I think that's where, again, the aligned incentives of Bitcoin, but that's also where Bitcoiners get very good at finding that balance.
Yeah. Well said. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think kind of on that, building kind of the future that we want to see, I think, like, I think as a Bitcoiner, you're kind of living in a bit of a dichotomy because, like myself, I'm living basically on a Bitcoin standard where, I keep as little fiat as I possibly can.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're not yet in a world where it's Bitcoin friendly. Like, let's say to be able to just spend your Bitcoin on and grocery stores. I mean, in a way where you don't have to interact necessarily with the fiat world. There's one thing, I think the infrastructure. I mean, we see things now like with Square enabling merchants to accept Bitcoin, which I think is
So
a
good.
huge step forward. And I think that will come. But I think that's one part, like is creating the infrastructure to do it, which I think is more easy. I think the difficult part is more the jurisdictional part, right? Because obviously in a lot of places, Bitcoin is treated as an asset, and when you sell it, there's a capital gains event and all that stuff. So I think there's like this dichotomy where it's like, I just want to live on Bitcoin and not touch fiat, but at the same time, then there's also these other implications that come into play. So
Mhm.
also as a company that's kind of helping to facilitate this, to help people live on a Bitcoin standard, how do you kind of battle with that?
Yeah, I think it's listening to our customers and what they care about. We have a lot of customers that pay their bills in Bitcoin at Bitcoin Well. We have a lot of customers that also send fiat from their Bitcoin wallets, meaning they send us Bitcoin, we turn the Bitcoin into dollars, and we send the dollars wherever they want us to go,
Yeah.
wherever they want to send them. And I think they're all handling their taxes fine. And at the end of the day, I think it just becomes more and more important to understand what the burden of owning Bitcoin is, because owning Bitcoin's a burden, right? It's a great blessing and it's luxury, but it's a burden. You have to learn a little bit, right? You got to go through some work. You got to spend some hours. You got to secure your seed. You got to roll your own seed. You got to like you got to know how to manage your UTXOs. Like it's not just a walk in the park here, nor should it be. And I think that like what? You thought the government was gonna make your life easy when you have money that they can't control? Like, it's like, so what do? You opt out, right? You build. You pursue the system that you want. It's like, it's not easy, to like go to the gym and be healthy and avoid the McDonald's easy cheap cheeseburger for the organic grass-fed smash burger that you can make at home on a stainless steel or a cast iron pan, depending on which side of the aisle you find on. Like it's like you thought it was going to be easy to be sovereign and generationally wealthy. Like, do your part, man. Do you want to deal with it, or do you want your grandkids to deal with it? This is kind of the basic thoughts in my mind, and it's like the more garbage that we can kind of blast through in 2025, the more our kids will be able to build because we will have cleaned up the trash.
Yeah.
And when you think about generations that way, the work becomes deeply important and urgent. Because if we pass this tax burden down to our grandkids, they're going to mess it up. They're going to there's a greater risk that they'll do it wrong. And we know what the right path is. We know that defunding the state is the right move. We know that separating money from state and removing the power of the state to strip another man's wealth is the move. We should do that. we should make steps towards that. And I think we are. Um, I think that characters like Michael Saylor are a threat to that. And I think that characters like Donald Trump are a threat to that.
Mhm.
And I think that Bitcoiners need to keep their wits about them, lower their time preference. Don't vote for the man that's going to pump your vags. Vote for them, you know, well, vote for them. I was going to say vote for the man that gives you freedom, which like Trump promised and didn't do. So it's like, now learn from that, right? Now, now understand, like maybe, hey, maybe this democratic system is not so democratic, and maybe it's not really designed to keep people free and sovereign. And then, hey, act accordingly.
Yeah. No, agreed. And I think, yeah, I think it's an opportunity. Like there's a lot of opportunity in this moment, and I think it's kind of like building the future that we want for future generations and for our kids.
Yeah.
I think that's super important. And so, I know we're running short on time here, so I want to ask you one final question that I ask usually at the end of every show. And because we constantly have new people coming into the space, and it can be a bit overwhelming, when to say the least, when you come in, especially now with a lot of noise out there. What advice would you have for, any newcomers entering the Bitcoin space?
Understand the reason you're here. Really, really get down to a conviction for building or being in the space. And if you're here to observe and learn, then don't be afraid to like observe and learn from the wrong people and then, act the right way because you learned that. And it's like, it's just ultimately getting down to the why. Why are you here? Are you here to create a system where your grandkids are able to be more sovereign than you? Then filter every single piece of info and every single action you make against that mission. If you're here to make sure that you can buy a Lambo in 5 years at the expense of your grandkids, then like politely get bent and leave. But I'll give a bonus one too, and I have a I think I have a problem, a growing problem with this space idolizing people. Like slay your heroes, get rid of them. Just because Michael Saylor says awesome things on a podcast doesn't mean he's doing good things. And I think that we are idolizing people when we need to formally and only idolize God and Jesus Christ, and we need to acknowledge the good works that men do, and we need to build off of the good works that men do, but we need to quit the idolization, because I promise you, your heroes will fail you. They have in the past. SBF was hailed a hero in the Forbes list and all this stuff, and he sucks. CZ was hailed a hero and all this stuff and all the great things he does for the industry, and he has single-handedly empowered more scams in this industry than anybody else. Brian Armstrong is a pioneer and was hailed a hero for all the great work he does. And he is holding people's Bitcoin hostage and is the single greatest honeypot and the single greatest point of failure in this industry. Slay your heroes. And if I am your hero, slay me. Do not give any man that power. Do not give anyone the ability to control your mind, to control your thoughts, to control your opinions. Understand why you are here, and then give men credit where credit is due, but be very, very comfortable calling them out or declining their actions if they make a mistake in your mind. We need to start getting down to first principle. Men are equal. We are all just men and women. And we need to very seriously understand that before we, especially this next class, like, all you kids that got into Bitcoin in 2022, 2023, and you're all feeling really good right now because you're up like 500%, you're going to go through it and the market's going to crash. Saylor's going to sell coins. Your perpetual motion money machine's going to stop. And I really hope that doesn't break your conviction in the Bitcoin protocol, because the Bitcoin protocol didn't do you wrong. Some other man did. Don't give other men that power. We're actively removing the power from men. Don't transfer it. Eliminate it.
Very well said. Very, very well said. And I couldn't agree more. Adam, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Where can my listeners, find more about Bitcoin Well and all the work that you're doing there as well?
Go to @BitcoinWell on Twitter. You can go to @Adam O'Brien on Twitter. Thank you, Elon, for the new fresh handles. You can go to bitcoinwell.com if you want to sign up for Bitcoin Well. It's a non-custodial Bitcoin platform where you can buy and sell Bitcoins right to self-custody in Canada and the US. We're the fastest, safest, and cheapest way to buy Bitcoin. And I say that very proudly, very honestly. And I look forward to someone who comes to compete, because we will then have an arm wrestling match and see who wins. But I think bitcoinwell.com if you want to sign up for an account, @BitcoinWell on Twitter, and then @Adam O'Brien on Twitter as well.
Awesome. And I'll leave that in the show notes for my listeners to check out directly. Again, Adam, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed the conversation today, and I'm sure my listeners also will.
Thanks, man. It's a pleasure.